That must have been the warmest welcome I've ever had at the conference. So I'm Viktor, as you know, from Stockholm, Sweden. I used to work in Silicon Valley at Google at the Flutter team, but now I am doing Dart on the backend full-time with Serverpod. Before I get started, how many here have heard about Serverpod before today? All right, like a fair amount. Any of you tried it out? Okay, yeah, I got a few. So I hope I get you inspired to try it out after today. So I'll just start by giving a super quick overview of what Serverpod is. Let me just check time so I know. Serverpod is an open source scalable app server written in Dart for the Flutter community. So before Serverpod, it was possible, but we made it so much easier to use Dart across your whole stack, which is great if you're a Flutter developer, right? Because you don't need to do the context switch between different languages. Are we getting some slides?
Yep. Sorry?
There's nothing up on the screen, I think.
What's happening with the screen? I didn't touch anything. It is working in... now. Oh. It's like the connection, maybe? Sorry.
No worries.
You know, like the house and everything. Let's see. Let me fix it.
All right, we're back. Yes. All right.
Go ahead.
All right. So the way it works is this is a very, very simple example. At the top, you have the server. And you create methods. You put them in a class that extends the endpoint. And then you run the Serverpod generate, and you will get a client. You have like your Flutter code down here. And then you can just call that method as if it was a local method. So Serverpod will generate the whole API for you. So you don't really have to worry about building your APIs. You just add methods to your server. It's scalable and progressive, so you can start out with a hobby project, and it's great for that, but it can scale to millions of users. We have very soon the possibility to deploy your server with just like one line in your command line interface. But if you want to host it yourself, you can host it in your basement on any place you run Dart. It's all open source code, right? Or you can host it in Google Cloud or AWS. We also spent the last year making sure that Serverpod works great with AI. We added a vector database if you do retrieval augmented generation or RAG. We also built an MCP server for Serverpods, so it's great if you want to generate code with an LLM or something like Cursor or Gemini CLI. I gave another talk at FlutterConf about that. If you go to my LinkedIn page, I'll have a slide about that in the end of it. If you want to learn to vibe code Flutter and Serverpod, that's the place to go. It also comes with batteries included, so you get like everything you need to build a backend, basically. You have a great ORM for talking with your database. We're going to have a quick look at that later here. See, yeah, authentication. You can sign in with Google, Apple, all those. It has support for caching. This is often an afterthought when you build a server, but it's can save you a lot of money because talking with a database is typically the most expensive thing you do. And if you have very complex queries or need to make many queries to build a page, you can cache that so you can just grab it later. And you can do that either locally on your server or with Redis. You can perform health checks, you can stream data. I'm going to give an example of that. We made it so you just return a Dart stream from your server and it just works. You can schedule tasks. Say you have a user who signs up, you want to remind them a week from now, you can make a future call, and that email will get sent a week from now, or whenever you want it. Support for uploading files. We have great logging. It comes with Serverpod comes with a log viewer, so you can visually see all your logs, but you can also connect it to things like Sentry or Datadog. And we built a complete testing framework. So if you do integration tests, that's super easy and clean code. Before we dive into how you build backends with Serverpod specifically, I know many of you are Flutter developers, mostly work on front end, and let's just, for you who haven't worked on the backend, have some quick basics for how things work. There are two types generally of databases. You have relational databases, which we use in Serverpod. We use Postgres. But you also have document databases. That's like the traditional Firestore in Firebase or MongoDB. We choose a relational database because Postgres is like the most commonly and widely used database for Serverpod. And it works like you have a spreadsheet basically. So every table you add is like a spreadsheet where every row is a data object in your database. But what's really cool with a relational database is that you can connect different tables, so you can have them point to each other, and that's called relations. And you can also do very quick searches in these, so you don't need to scan the whole table. You can build indexes and find things very quickly. And then you typically use data models to map Dart objects, in this case, to rows in the database, and that's called an ORM, or object relation mapping. So the simplest of servers setups looks like this. You have a client, and it talks to your API server, where you have an API, and that API server talks with the database. So this will work with Serverpod or most servers, API servers. But typically there are a few more things you need to keep in mind. You need a way to serialize your data. That's basically how you take your objects and pack them up and send them to your Flutter app or your client. And then you have endpoints. Those are the connection points in the server that you connect to, and they typically have methods also where you can call different methods on one endpoint. Then when you scale this up, you may need to have more than one server because maybe you have many millions of users, and then you need a load balancer that can route you to multiple different API servers. So in practice, your setup will look a little bit more complex, but it's not too crazy, right? You have the client, ask the load balancer for data, and that will route you to an API server, and the API servers will talk with your database and optionally have a cache too. So talking with the database, really expensive, so you can cache complex queries. For instance, I built a news app before, and building the front page of the news site took like maybe 100 queries, but almost all users see the same front page, right? So we can just like build that once, save it in the cache, and then we can pull it out and just populate it with some extra data about that's specific to a single user, for instance. And then you can get down to, instead of doing 100 queries, you can do 5 queries. Right, so I'm not going to cover how you install Serverpod. It's like super easy if you have Dart or Flutter installed. But let's look at how you set up a project and how that works with Serverpod. So you just do Serverpod create, and in this case we have a mypod, and then you have a project, and it comes with 3 different Dart packages. So if we look inside the mypod directory, you'll find a mypod client mypod Flutter and mypod server directory. So the server directory, this is where you place all your server code. You just add your endpoints here, add methods to your endpoints, and then you run serverpod generate, and that will both generate code in the server, but also generate the full client. So the client you don't really need to touch, just import it into your Flutter app. And the mypod Flutter is just a super basic Flutter app. And to start it, Serverpod, you go into the server directory, and then you first start up Docker. And the reason you start Docker is just to run a Postgres database. We choose to run it through Docker. You can install it yourself, but it's kind of complicated to install Postgres, and it turned out it's much easier to just use Docker for it. So that's just a single command to get that up and running, and then you just run dart bin/main.dart, which is the main file. And typically you want to apply migrations as well, especially when you run it in development mode. And that will just create all the default database tables. Or if you have made any changes to your database, it will also install your changes. And then you can go into the Flutter directory and just type flutter run. And you'll get like the sample example app where you can just write a string, hit send, and
so if you use the stream, if you want to read the application,
Déjame poner una cosa. Espera, ya están ahí. Hay un montón de esto. Pues más de eso. Camiseta. 1, 2, 3. Estos son S's.
Demasiado, ¿eh?
Ya, por eso. Uno, 3, 4, 5. Ya está. Bien, bien.
Mira, después de esto fuera.
Sí. Y esto también aparte, algunas pegatinas de aquí. Sí. ¿No has cogido ninguna? Vale.
Aquí la dejo frente a Andreu aparte.
Ah, vale.
That's a difference we made using some limits on how much you want to scale versus one day is very expensive. So you can say like, hey, I want to have.
No, las pegatinas van aparte, son otras.
So that is sort of protection for.
No, o sea, una persona una, una persona.
Also, Serverpod is much more efficient for communicating. Like, you really have communication. You don't have to use the database. Typically, you use a application because the database uses file store, and it's very expensive to read and write. To updates, to do something like game, for instance, you want to have that process on the server. So, yeah, and also
Esta es la caja de los speakers, para dárseles para que suban. Ahí.